Hi, and welcome to our last part talking with poets and friends of the European Poetry Festival. My name is Richard Ettinger, and as a student for English literature and philosophy, I'm deeply interested in creative writing, English literature, and poetry. Welcome with me, our today's guest, the wonderful Jaume C. Pons Alorda. Hi, how are you doing, Jaume?
Hi, how are you? I am very happy to be talking here with you to spread the passion for poetry and literature and English letters.
Awesome, thank you so much. Jaume, would you like to give us some words about yourself? Please introduce yourself.
Of course, my name is Jaume C. Pons Alorda, as Richard already said. I am a Catalan poet. I am also a translator, a publisher, and writer in prose. I write in Catalan, which is my mother tongue. I am from Mallorca, but I live in Vilafranca del Penedès, which is a town very near Barcelona and also very near to Tarragona. I started publishing poetry books in the year 2007, and it was also the same time in which I started reciting everywhere, not only in Catalonia, not only in Valencia and the Balearic Islands, but also throughout Europe and also in the United States of America. I also recited some time ago. I've been capable of reciting in Italy, in Germany, in Serbia, in Croatia, in France, and also in England. So for me, it was a great pleasure to recite in the European Poetry Festival. Also, thanks to the invitation of Stephen Fowler, the director, and also thanks to the help of the Institut Ramon Llull, which helped us to develop all our actions, not only for us, but also to spread Catalan language, Catalan linguistics, and Catalan culture all around the world. So this is myself, and I am very happy to talk with you, Richard.
Jaume, so thankful for you being here. Thanks for introducing yourself. And yeah, let's just dig into the questions. I mean, we have some to talk about. And yeah, so first question, do you have a current book that you can't put down?
In fact, I am a case of one of these Catalan writers that is very prolific. I have published 17 books of poetry. So, in my case, I know that every book is a work in progress, in the sense that it has a beginning, it has an ending, and it has a work in the middle. So, for me, it's not complicated to put down books, in the sense that, for instance, if I am not writing one book, I'm writing the other one. The same as with readings. If I am reading one book or the other, I'm always in action. For me, creativity is that. And for me, poetry is very linked to this idea. The thing is that I do not only write poetry, I write poetry, of course, but for me, poetry is a way of living. So, uh, in the same way that everything has to be put in your life, and you have to organize your life in such a way. So for me, is like it's working and developing and sharing your passion with the rest of people, because poetry for me is something that defines my life, my personality, but also the way through which I connect to others. So in that sense, this is one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be talking to you, because thanks to poetry, Richard, we met, and thanks to poetry, many people will be able to know about these poets and about different ways of writing and different ways of sharing the same passion, which for me is fundamental.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for those words. I mean, it's interesting how connecting the medium of poetry can be. And if you do it in the Catalonian language or even in the English language, it is always a connection in there. And I mean, we will talk about that later, but you had some readings where you just did part Catalonian and then switched into English to translate what you just read out. And but maybe we can talk about it right now. How much of the sense that you have in the Catalonian can you transfer into English? Is there something that gets lost? I had just recently a conversation with a friend. They're doing like a poetry, like a movie about Islamic poetry, and they said that there are some like meanings they cannot translate. It's just in the Islamic language. It's so implemented, you know. It's not, they're not able to take it out of it. So how is it with the Catalonian?
In fact, as I told you before, apart from poet, I am prose writer, I am a publisher and a translator. My work as a translator has helped Catalan readers to read in Catalan, sometimes for the very first moment and for the very first time. Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass, the complete edition, Elizabeth Bishop, first Catalan translation, William Wordsworth, William Blake, Iris Murdoch, Penelope Fitzgerald. So the thing is that I understand, as Robert Frost said, that poetry is what you lose in the translation. I understand the Italian people when they say traduttore traditore, that translating is a betrayal. But as a creator, as a writer, I don't really trust these things, because the same way in which we can connect, another Italian author, Umberto Eco, said that translation is the language of Europe, which is right, is the way in which we connect. Of course, sometimes some senses, some expressions, and some things cannot be fully translated, because if they were, they wouldn't be comprehended. But the thing is that we can find a way so that our message and our communication manages to get to another country. And this is why I like a play on words that we have in Catalan, which says that traduir no es trair, traduir es triar, in the sense that you change the vowels in the words. You have translating is not betraying, translating is choosing the best ways in which these poems, these novels, these films, these whatever you want to translate can arrive at another culture. And nowadays I am very happy because we can say that the translations of Catalan authors from other languages has been increasing during the last years. And it was the very first moment in the International Booker Prize, the very first time that the Catalan novel was one of the nominees, Eva Baltasar, with her novel Boulder, translated in English for the very first time. So the thing is that, of course, maybe sometimes we don't have it easy to translate one linguistic code to the other, but we always can find the way, the very same way that it's very difficult for poets and for creators to translate the language of our mind. So in that sense, I always say that, of course, when you are a translator, you are putting from one code to the other. But when you are writing, when you are a poet and you have to put in words the things that you have in emotion, in thought, and in culture, also from thought and from
The internet connection is right now.
perspective and from and exactly, and it's very complicated. Did you feel it, Richard? Did you hear that?
Yeah, it was just like getting stuck in the end, but I got what you said. And I have a follow-up question. How much interpretation do you put into these translations? And how can you say, like, my interpretation is justifying the words that the author used in English or in another language or in Catalonian to put it in English?
That's a very beautiful question, because it has a beautiful answer, in the sense that a translation is never definitive. This is why, for instance, generation after generation, we can keep translating books into our language. For instance, in the case of English, it just received a new translation of Homer's The Iliad, and it's a classical book which has been translated during hundreds and hundreds of years. So the idea is, why do we need another translation? Because societies change, because languages change, because cultures change. So a translation is not only a thing that is put into language or in words. A translation is it's like a human being, it's like a living being that has to be adapted to the different context. So in this sense, this is why, for instance, there can be a translation of my work now, but 50 years later, it can still be translated, because there will be another person with another sensibility who will discover other possibilities. So this is why translation is like a reading process. You cannot say that one reader is wrong. That reader has an interpretation. The same with the translator. That translator is not wrong or is right. That person is offering that their perspective on that determined reading. This is why reading and writing are processes of freedom. And in such a freedom, we choose the language that we need in every occasion.
Yeah, thank you so much. I couldn't wish for a better answer. I mean, that felt like a lot. And yeah, very interesting. In that sense, you took part at the European Poetry Festival for quite a long time. Can you sum up, like, what is your experience about it? How would you sum it up, like, in just a couple of words? How do you like it? How was it for you? Just to let the listeners, the viewers know what is happening there and why you like it so much. Or maybe you have some critiques. I don't know. Let me know.
In my case, I have three words that for me are like a scream of living, like an hymn. And it's when I like something very much, I say it's epic and majestic. It's epic because for I have an epic sense of life, and majestic because it connects to this royalty that has to have that the great hearts and the great minds must have and share with the rest of people. So for me, joining the European Poetry Festival was an epic and majestic experience that I enjoyed a lot. Why? Because, as we said before, we share our passion with many other people around the world. And when you have the opportunity to share this passion with other people which are far from your language, far from your culture, and far from your usual perspective, it's like a mind-blowing experience which shows you, hey man, the world is much bigger, and you can write in many different ways, and it's not necessary that you keep the standards or the typical things. So this is why it's so important to have a dialogue, not only between poets, but also the dialogue, the living dialogue between poetry and the other arts, and one literature with other countries. This is why I consider that traveling, that joining festivals, and that translating and writing are very enriching experiences which can help us to write not only better but with more happiness. And at the same time, as well as Stephen said, we write in solitude but not in loneliness, which is very beautiful. We need to be alone when we write, but then we have to share it with people, with readers, with listeners, or with the rest of people who also share the very same thing. Though, so these kind of experiences, I think that they will last forever. Most of all in a world and with a lot of people which think that with the social media and being closed at home is enough. It's never enough, because we are human beings, and as human beings we need this human touch in as many occasions as possible.
Definitely. Very much agree on that point. We need to be together to exchange and explore more. And this is nourishing for the further progress. Like whatever you are doing, if you're a writer, you're a poet or something, and you talk to others, it's always enriching. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, fine. Very good. Let's talk about this year's performance of you. You did it was kind of duet with Michael O'Mahony.
Yes.
You were singing in English, and would you like to say something about that song? Because that song, I think it is the same melody as you were singing 2013 in Belgrade at a poetry and book festival. Is that right? And what about this melody? Where does it come from? What does it mean to you?
For instance, I like to use typical Catalan melodies which are connected to popular culture and folkloric tradition, that are songs that we cant as that we sing as lullabies, or also as hymns in the street. So I like using these melodies that I have already in my heart and in my mind, and use them for poetry, because I consider that a performance is a performance that you are in front of some people and you have to offer some kind of show. For me, that's a way to bring poetry to people that normally are not readers of poetry. But in that sense, you create an interest, so that with the performance, maybe these people will say someday, I didn't know that poetry was able to be like this. So for me, I have very clear something that I like publishing my books, and when I make a performance, for me, it's like to check if the poem works. There was a Catalan poet called Blake that we love a lot, because he was very surprising and powerful. He said that he didn't publish a poem in paper before he had read it 100 times aloud. So for me, it's something like that. the more times you recite a poem, you realize if it is working, if it needs some changes, if you can make it better some way or the other. So for me, a performance is like a laboratory to check the things that I write, and vice versa. Things that then I make a performance, they can be turned into the written word. So if you ask me about my performances, I like that they are complete. I like being theatrical. I like that I can sing, for instance. I can recite in different modulations of voice. Now very hard, I like screaming a lot, or very low, that people say, what is this guy saying? So for me, human voice is like an instrument. Of course, it's an instrument. It's the instrument that we can use every day. So for me, it's a way also to develop different possibilities for the poem, and also for the spectacle that you want to share with the rest of people.
Sure. Yeah, it's like bringing arts together and then making a huge show out of it. I mean, it's like very impressive. Usually at poetry readings, people are just sitting, everybody's like quiet, and then you come in and you sing so powerful, you know, and you wake them up in a way, and you tear them in like emotionally, and then it just starts, you know, and then the words come, and yeah. So I really had that feeling. What is the reaction? What is usually happening? You had maybe Catalonian people in your audience, and they said, wow, this song, I haven't heard it in years, and now you sang it. How does it go?
It's precisely as you say. For instance, in the European Poetry Festival, there were some Catalan people, and they were surprised because I did both in Catalan first, so that people could hear the language. I like people knowing and discovering my language because it's not very typical, and at the same time, I want them to understand. And sometimes I read aloud in Catalan, and some people were already laughing, and I make the joke, say, "Hey, don't laugh yet. The translation hasn't come." So for me, reciting is a living thing. I don't like having things organized already, saying I'm going to recite this or that. I like having lots of possibilities, so that when I am there, I can see the reaction of people. So this is like a real performance. It's like a live performance, which I adapt depending on the circumstances. And the reactions I like provoking are these ones, like surprise, delight, something different, something unexpected, that anything can happen, and also showing that poetry can be funny. Of course, for me, poetry is deep and profound and talks about human, very powerful things, and very powerful ways of living and thinking, and morals, of course. But for me, also, poetry has to be something powerful that makes people have a lot of emotion. So this is why I perform in such a way, because for me, when I discovered that poetry can be this as well, it was the moment in which I said, okay, I would like to write like this. Poetry is not only writing a sonnet. Poetry is not only a sextina. Poetry is a way to express, and you can express in as many possible ways that you have in front of you.
Yeah, and you did it in a very powerful way. So everybody who wants to watch it, it's on Stephen J. Fowler's YouTube channel. And I think also on your channel, you have what is the name of your channel?
For instance, if they look for my name, Jaume C. Pons Alorda, in YouTube, they will find like hundreds of videos that I've been making. You said, for instance, you mentioned the ones in Serbia and Croatia, but also in Catalonia, also in England, also in Germany. So this is something which I also like using a lot, the social media and the different possibilities, so that poetry can be spread throughout the world and throughout all the possible platforms.
Yeah, very nice. So everybody go and watch it. It's definitely worth it. And maybe on the next poetry festival, the European Poetry Festival, which will take place sometime in the future.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah. So I want to point out, yeah, a line in one of your poems. It says, we do not walk into the fire to cremate ourselves, rather to make the flames burn a little brighter. Would you like to explore a little bit on that phrase?
It's like the typical question that what is first, the egg or the chicken? In the sense that, of course, everything has a perspective. So at the same time, you are doing both things. You are cremating yourself, but at the same time, so that the flames don't die at the same. So in that sense, it's a poem which provokes a reaction, because it's not the expected thing. You are playing, in the sense that you are trying to say, no, it's not this, it's that. For me, this is poetry. Poetry is like a focus which goes to things that people wouldn't consider for the very first occasion. So it goes in a deep truth, it goes beyond the surface, and at the same time, it can provide you a sense of beauty, a sense of sublime. So, in that sense, this sacrifice, which can be seen in many ways of our culture, for instance, we can talk about the martyrdoms of different cultures, the Egyptian, the Catholical, all of them. The thing is that there is a deep sense in that martyrdom, in that sacrifice. So, for me, poetry is this way of seeing realities through other perspectives, through other ways, to surprise, and also to create violence in language. In that sense, for instance, I don't like that poetry that is smooth and that arrives in an easy way. Of course, I accept that people want to write in such modes, and for me, it's legal and it's perfect because I accept absolute freedom because I think that we must have freedom, and at the same time, I don't believe in censorship. I am against censorship. I believe that we must write beyond even what societies allow us to do, because poetry is a way to develop the future, future sensibilities, future emotions, and future ideas. So this poem for me condenses all these possibilities to express things that have never been expressed before, and to see things in different ways.
Yeah. So why making the flame burn a little brighter and cremating, giving something from you? That's an artistical progress. That's what happens, like the process that happens, that you come from one stage and you go to another stage. How can we understand it, maybe?
Look, for instance, now I think that I have a good example to talk about this, which is the movie Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan. In that sense, this poem that I wrote and I recited in the European Poetry Festival was published 3 years ago. So it doesn't have a connection with Oppenheimer, but when I went to the cinema to watch the movie, I could see these similarities. Why? In the sense that we can see the conflict of the main character, Oppenheimer, at a given moment when, for instance, the Nazis have been defeated. And the Nazis were the ones for which they were preparing the bomb. So that when this moment arrives, Oppenheimer still wants to keep with the experimentation. Why? Not because he wants to kill people. That's not his idea, and this is why he feels so guilty after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but because he's considering that what he's doing is an evolution of human technology and of the knowledge that you have according to the quantics and the physics and all this. So in that sense, of course, we see the problem of the main character, because he's a scientist who wants to have more knowledge to know that they have invented something, and it's something new. But the thing is that what they have invented is a massive destruction weapon. And that's the problem. That's the problem with Oppenheimer. Though for me, the poem is the same. This poem would be very violent for people that have had bad experiences with fire, of course. But at the same time, it's something that has to reflect about the human condition. And talking about human conditions and human things and human characteristics is not an easy thing. In fact, we are a race which is capable of killing, of creating wars, of devastating, and of making a lot of harm to the rest of the species, not only in the planet, but also to the same human beings of other cultures and other countries. For instance, nowadays we are still in war. There are lots of wars going on in the world, but in Europe, for instance, we are in war because Russia and Ukraine are in this war-like conflict nowadays. So for me, poetry is something that has to explore as well the deep zones and the conflictive zones of the human psyche and of the human essence.
Okay, thank you so much. And I guess the sentence also from one of your poems, burn everything, fire is the best editor, also fits into that sense. So it's, yeah,
Exactly.
definitely.
Exactly.
I really like
In
that
fact,
one. Yeah.
as you see, I have lots of poems related to fire and to the image of fire. because fire is a way to destroy, but also fire is a way that you have heat, that you can cook, that you can have different things. So in the fire there are many possibilities, and not all of them are good or nice.
Yeah, yeah. And fire, like in maybe not Spain, but in colder countries, it's also warmth. It's surviving. We wouldn't survive without heating, and yeah.
Absolutely,
Life.
absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I really like that. Also, like if you, what I also thought about that sentence, if you write something and you are like proud about it, or you feel good about it, and you just throw it into the fire, you destroy half of it, or just, and then you find something new, like in a different sense, it's the best editor. So if you think about something and you throw yourself into it, and it maybe you take some damage in some way, I don't know, you go drinking or whatever, and then you have like a good idea. It maybe it makes a greater picture out of what you already have. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's the point. For instance, in my case, I've published 17 books of poetry, but I haven't published everything I have written. I
Mm.
think that, for instance, I have written 20 more books that were burned, because for me the fire is the best editor and fire is the best publisher. Because at a given moment, Ernest Hemingway said that the best friend of the writer is the garbage can, and I agree with that. I agree with that, because we don't have to publish everything. We don't have to write everything. Of course we have to create and try to develop different things, but for me the garbage can and the fire are very important to show us what is definitive and what must be kept.
Yeah, yeah. You gave something to the flames to have another product, and this is like the base is something that is like a very, maybe ashes or something. So yeah.
It's like the myth of the phoenix bird. It's exactly that. From
Yeah,
the ashes and from the burning, another creature, another
yeah.
another reborn.
It arises from the ashes. Very nice. Yeah. Okay. I have another question for you. And it's a question that I, who also write a little bit, definitely want to hear the answer from. So, what advice would you give to poets from a non-English speaking background that try to make it in English?
I always say the same. The beautiful thing of poetry, as Pier Paolo Pasolini said, is that is one of the last refuges against capitalism. We do not write to become famous. We do not write poetry to become famous. We do not write poetry to earn money. We do not write poetry because it's something that, oh, it's super cool. Now, if you want to be super cool, you have to be a participant in Big Brother shows, or you have to be a football player or soccer player, or you have to be famous going to these garbage programs. We write poetry, as Pier Paolo Pasolini said, because the people who write it are doing something which goes against the system and against the typical powers in the world. So this is the first thing that people who want to write poetry must take into account, that if they are writing poetry, is not to achieve something. It's because writing poetry is the goal, the maximum goal, to create beauty, to express emotions, to have fun, to think of human condition, and also to use a way of art which is very easy to use. If you want to make a theater play, if you want to make a movie, if you want to make a painting, you need many things. Maybe you need cameras, maybe you need colors, maybe you need a stage. But if you want to write poetry, you only need one paper and one pencil, and that's absolutely enough. And if you don't have it and you have memory, you can do it by heart. So in that sense, the important essence of poetry is to devote yourself to some art that is not going to become part of the powers, which is not going to be part of the elites, which is not going to make you, to provide you with something beyond. So the piece of advice: to write, to read a lot, to believe, to be experimental, because we must make poetry evolve through different ways, to keep insisting, keep trying, and of course keep always creating. For me, is the piece of advice that I would have liked to have when I was young and when I started, because at a given moment I thought, no, I'm going to become a very famous poet, I'm going to win the Nobel Prize. No, no, no. It doesn't work like this. Poetry is itself the goal. And this is why poetry is so dangerous for the dictatorships, and also poetry is dangerous for the markets, because the poets are crazy. And this is what makes us powerful, that poets, we are crazy. We are absolutely crazy.
Thank you so much. The inspiring words, really. It's they just feel right to hear them, because they're so like empowering in a way to just keep doing whatever you do and express yourself in a way. And yeah, very
And
good.
always with passion. For me, that's the fundamental, with passion. That life, how do you want to live your life? What is important for you in life? For me, it's poetry. Poetry is the essence of my life because of this, because it offers me a passion, because it offers me a way to create, to think, and to connect with the rest of human beings, which for me are interesting. Those people that have a sensibility. And it's not necessary for you to write verses to become a poet. There are poets who never write a line, but they are poets of life, that they see life in a poetic way. And this is why poetry goes beyond the letters and the words, because filmmakers can be poets. Tarkovsky was a poet, Pasolini was a poet. There are painters who are poets, and there are lots of prose writers who are poets, that they write poetry in prose. And this is why also poetry is very dangerous and cannot be conveyed in one etiquette, because it has many shapes, and every person, every poet writes and creates and regenerates poetry in different ways. And I am absolutely convinced that even though it's for minorities, for happy few, some happy few that T.S. Eliot said, I think that it's for this happy few, it's a way of life.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much again. Yeah. We are taking those words. I would love to continue that conversation, but we are like at the end of this Zoom interview. So maybe in a different setting, maybe at a different place, I would love to have that going. And for you, where we can find you, you can plug everything. Is there a book coming out next? Is there a book you want the listeners, the viewers to definitely read through in the next weeks? Are you doing some open mics, some shows somewhere? Let us know. Let us know.
Thank you very much. In fact, if they want to see my work through the internet, they can find it. But everybody who wants to meet me through the social networks, I'm very active. I recommend books, I recommend movies, I recommend different things. I always have recitings in Barcelona. For instance, if you are going to come to Catalonia, or you are interested in poetry, of course, try to find the information, because you will find it. Because I think that every week I have something. And apart from books, last year I published my latest poetry book, and next year I'm going to publish another one called Pasolini's Ashes, or the Ashes of Pasolini, because Pasolini made a great book called The Ashes of Gramsci, which was one of his masters. So I am doing the same with Pasolini. And as we said before, I am also talking about fire, about ashes, about regeneration, about myths, and about our life. So Richard, for me, it was a great pleasure to talk to you. One more reason to have enjoyed the participation in the European Poetry Festival. And as we share the same passion for poetry, I am absolutely sure that we are going to meet somewhere in Europe. Europe is the great battlefield. So at a given moment, I am sure that we are going to meet again.
Yeah, I would love to, Jaume. So hopefully we're going to make it in the future. And thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who watched this episode. And hopefully we see each other in the future. Take care, Jaume. See ya.
Take care, Richard. See you, and visca la poesia.